Welcome to this lesson on modal verbs to show possibility. Quick reminder, if it's needed, verbs we often refer to as doing words. They're words which suggest action, movement, or something happening. For example, in the sentence below, the dog excitedly wagged its tail back and forth. You can see wagged is the verb, it's the thing that is being done. And similarly, we might have multiple verbs in a sentence, as in the example, I am going to the supermarket this weekend to buy groceries. Going is the past tense of the verb to go, and of course to buy as well is a verb in this context. Modal verbs are the term modal verb is a verb which is in some way explained. So sometimes we have a verb, sometimes we want to describe it. Now, to describe a verb, to modify a verb, we use an adverb. Modal verbs are different from that, okay? So in this lesson, what we're going to do is tease out that difference between adverbs, which we all know how to use from school, and modal verbs, something a little bit new. We are going to think about modal verbs as words or pairs of words which describe the degree of possibility. By that I mean how likely or how certain or how possible we think the verb is to happen. Okay? For example, here I have the stem sentence. It's about Harry winning the game of basketball. Look at the 4 different ways I have expressed this sentence. Harry will win the game of basketball. Harry might win the game of basketball. Harry could win the game of basketball. Harry should win the game of basketball. Now, for each of those, you'll be able to identify the verb, which is win, to win something. And you can see before that, I've put a modal verb. The modal verb tells me the likelihood, how likely or how possible or probable it is that Harry is going to win this game of basketball. So what I want you to do is put these in order on which you think is the most to the least likely to happen. So Harry will win, Harry might win, Harry could win, or Harry should win. Which of those do you think implies the least amount of certainty, and which of those do you think the most amount of certainty? So will win, might win, could win, or should win. So there are shades of grey in this. There aren't definite answers, but some things for this are certain. One of those for certain is in that top one, Harry will win the game of basketball. I am saying that is a certainty. He will win it, 100%. He will win it. So you can see that I am saying that it's certain to happen. In the second one, Harry might win the game of basketball. I'm saying it's possible, but it's not certain. It's also not impossible. Harry could win the game of basketball. Well, we can see again that is one where it's possible. He could win it. He also might not win it. And again, for the last one, Harry should win the game of basketball. Now, saying he should do is more likely than he could do. So he should win it. It's more likely than not he could win it. But it's still not absolutely certain. There might be an upset, there might be an injury, something else might happen. So I hope you can see that by using different modal verbs, will, might, could, and should, I change the meaning of the verb. I change the probability that I think it will happen. So to break it down even further, modal verbs vary the degree of certainty. Now, if we are absolutely certain about something, we might use the modal verbs will or must. If something is a possibility, it could happen, but it might not happen, we might say could, should, might, or may. There are some rules around when you use might and when you use may that we will talk about in later lessons. We also have things that are impossible. Now, often these are contractions. Now, no, not always contractions. You can't just identify that it's a contraction and say then it's definitely an impossibility. But a lot of the time, they are just the antonym of certainties or possibilities. For example, won't is the antonym of will. Won't being short for will not. Can't is obviously the opposite of can. Can could be a possible modal verb as well. Or mustn't is also one that's saying it's impossible. We mustn't do it under no circumstances. What I would like you to do now is just try putting these into the sample sentence here to see how the modal verb changes the verb. For example, Zoe will win the tournament this weekend. We can say that is certain. Zoe is guaranteed 100% to win the tournament this weekend. Zoe will win the tournament this weekend. What about if I use one of my possible modal verbs? Zoe might win the tournament this weekend. I'm saying it's a possibility, but it's not certain. That's the same for if I said Zoe should win the tournament. It's more likely, but it's still not certain. So within this possibility, modal verbs, there are degrees of how likely it is as well that you might be able to start to identify. Last, we have the impossible modal verbs. Zoe won't win the tournament this weekend. Zoe can't win the tournament this weekend. Or Zoe mustn't win the tournament this weekend. We're saying that they're absolute impossibilities. Something to be careful about. In this sentence below, can you identify the modal verb in the sentence? Mike will definitely win this competition. So, this is a bit of a trick question. So don't be confused if you said it's definitely. The word definitely is not a modal verb. It does tell me how likely something is to happen. It's definitely going to happen. However, definitely is not a modal verb. We need the modal verb will. Let's see what happens if we take will out of the sentence. Mike definitely win in this competition. It doesn't make sense. So we need the modal verb to help the adverb definitely get into the sentence. So I could say Mike will win in this competition. That way it would be certain, wouldn't it? Mike will win in this competition. The adverb just gives me some extra information. He will definitely win in this competition. The sentence still makes sense without the adverb, but it doesn't make sense without the modal verb will. This is something that you need to be careful of, especially in task 3. When I come to ask you to write your own sentences, some of you might fall into the trap of saying, Mike really wants to win the competition, or something like that. Or Harry, in some certainty, might, blah, blah. Those are not modal verbs. Stick, if you are unsure, with these modal verbs here. And modal verbs pair up with a verb. For example, will win, or must watch, or could sit, or should work, or won't understand, or things like that. So let's have a look then at your independent task. Challenge 1 is for you to describe what a modal verb is in your own words. Now, please don't copy and paste this. I can look up, if I want to, what Wikipedia says a modal verb is, or what Google says a modal verb is. I want you to demonstrate that you understand what a modal verb is, please. For challenge 2, for each of the modal verbs, suggest whether it suggests it's impossible, it's possible, or it's certain. So let's have a go at the first one together, might. So what it might help for you to do is put this in a sentence. Mr. Plummer might know the answer. Now, am I saying that it's impossible? I definitely don't know the answer. I say it's possible, or is it saying that I definitely do know the answer? Mr. Plummer might know the answer. Well, I would suggest that one is possible. And might, but I also might not. It's unsure. And you need to go through all of those ones and identify what you think it is. The answer is always going to be impossible, possible, or certain. For challenge 3, you need to pick one of the possible, and one of the certain modal verbs and use it in a sentence. The longer and more descriptive the sentence, the better. Please underline, highlight, or change the text colour of the modal verb you use. For example, in the example, Mr. Plumber will definitely win the match. So actually, Mr. Plumber, that's me, that is a pronoun, so I need to leave that one alone. Will definitely, oh, my apologies, will definitely win the match. So definitely is an adverb. Remember, don't get confused about that. Win is the verb to win something, and the match is the subject of this sentence. So it's will is the modal verb. So I'm going to either highlight that, underline it, make it bold, whatever it is that you want to do. So I'm going to get rid of that because I want you to do your own. Remember, it doesn't have to be a simple sentence. It can be a complex sentence if you want it to be. So those are your 3 tasks. Over to you.